Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristen Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised we'd be cordial.
I'm Kristen Sunanta Walker here, host of Mental Health News Radio, and I'm here with one of our most downloaded guests, not surprising considering the topic, Wendy Behary. Thank you so much for coming back on the show again.
Thanks, Kristen. It's fun to be back with you.
Absolutely. I know you're jet lagged, or maybe you're just getting over it today because you've been on like whirlwind travel, haven't you?
Yeah. I got back a week ago, but it's a slow,
yes,
recovery for me.
Time zones are slow recovery for anyone. Absolutely. For any listeners that didn't listen to our other shows, can you share a little bit about your background with the new listeners?
Yeah, sure. I am an expert in narcissism. I've been working with primarily narcissistic men for the last 20 plus years. I am trained as a schema therapist, and I spend a lot of my time traveling the globe, talking to therapists and talking to the general public as well on issues of narcissism, how to treat it, how to deal with it, how to survive it. That's me.
And doing a mighty fine job, I might add.
I wrote a book about it too. I wrote a book that has done very well, and I'm really proud of the book. It's called Disarming the Narcissist, and it's now translated in about 11 languages.
Fantastic. So I have some questions when people knew you were coming on, and I always love that when people have questions. This is still our most downloaded topic, of course.
I'll bet.
So one of the questions is related to a listener who was dealing with a family member that has been diagnosed as a sociopath and has been lying, obviously, for their whole lives, and had gotten in some kind of squabble with their partner, and the partner, and it ended up getting to the authorities, and this person was put in jail and in prison for what they did. And then the partner came back and started unleashing hell on the family, on everyone for not supporting him while he's in jail, and lying for him and doing other things to help him get a lighter sentence. And what I thought was interesting was about that is to talk about, when partners of narcissists or sociopaths, psychopaths, and so on do that, when they themselves have reported abuse, their partner ends up in jail or prison because of this abuse or lying or whatever it is, and then they recant, which is why states don't take testimony from victims anymore because it's such a natural occurrence. And then they start behaving deplorably to the people that won't also buy into the lie of this person's behavior who went to jail for good reason.
This is such a complicated and important question that you're asking. And it's different if it's, let me explain the differences. If it's a narcissist, not a sociopath, because they really are different. And when you're dealing with a narcissist, you're dealing typically with someone who is, obviously they're extremely hurtful and can create trauma based on their betrayal, based on their lies and their self-absorbed behaviors. The motivational drivers are a little bit different when it's a narcissist versus a sociopath, meaning narcissists are much more prone towards doing things that can hurt you, but it's designed to protect their ego. It's not really designed for the pleasure of creating pain and harm, whereas sociopaths a little bit more invested in sort of the pleasure of designing painful outcomes. They're sort of missing the moral compass, as we like to say. Whereas narcissists, theirs is maybe dormant or detained, but it's there. And with some help, we can sometimes bring it to the surface or with enough leverage. But the question you ask is so important because in the treatment room, if I'm working with a narcissist and I have a lot of leverage, meaning a partner has said, I'm done, I've had it, and they mean it. And, they say to their narcissistic partner, you've got to get help, or there's no chance. I'm right at the edge. Narcissist comes into therapy, and this is great. I've got leverage. They still care about the relationship. They don't want to lose it. They don't want to lose their children. And then the partner starts to weaken. They start to get scared because the narcissist may be going home and saying things like, I'll take the children from you. I'll leave you financially ruined. I don't care if you leave me. Go ahead and leave me. They'll do things to try to squirm out of therapy.
Right.
And then the partner retracts the consequence, because that's what leverage is. It's a consequence that the narcissist doesn't want to face. And once that happens, it weakens the opportunity for anything meaningful to happen in the treatment room.
Right. They actually cause more harm because they're continuing to enable this bad behavior.
And it's why I coach a lot of partners to say, saying to them, I know it's scary. They typically will not leave you if they don't have someone already lined up in the wings. Now, they may have somebody waiting in the wings, or they may have an entourage of their own, gang or fans and followers, but they don't usually just walk out because there's so much shame and loneliness attached to that underneath all this, noise and bluster. So hang in there, because your leverage is the only thing that's going to keep this momentum for therapy to take off, to launch, and to really be meaningful. But it's hard. It's, as you said, it is an anticipated outcome. With sociopaths, it's not that different. It's just the scale. On the scale, it's much higher. It's more severe. The consequences can be much greater, and partners can end up being incredibly alienated from their support system and their loved ones, because people get tired, like with battered women syndrome. They just get tired of the repetitious cycle, that continues to occur. And I'm really compassionate to partners, because there's so much fear, so much self-doubt, so much, what if it was my fault? What if I could have made it better? What if I actually provoked it? What if I were just a little wiser? What if I were just a little prettier? What if? And so they're frightened. What's going to happen when he gets out of jail? What's going to happen when, he's finally released back into the community? So they get scared, and it's so important to have help, to have a support system that can keep you solid, that can keep you grounded in your need to say what's so, to protect yourself, to not doubt yourself, to maintain an advocacy and a voice for yourself. This is so critical in both cases, but, just different levels of severity when it comes to outcome.
Right. And, many times, because we get so many emails from people, we will see victims of this abuse unleash, like I said, hell on all the people that are not continuing to stay and support this person who's behaved deplorably over and over and over again, and they start acting as what we call a flying monkey on behalf of the narcissist, and then they take on the role of trying to destroy people's reputations and lives for not continuing the lie with them. That's the part that, people don't really understand. And sometimes it isn't even a situation where they're worried about their partner being in jail and when they might come home. They're more worried that the life of fantasy that they've created with this person has been punched a hole through publicly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they're being triggered. So the type of person you're describing in that partner is usually, and I would, I don't know them all, obviously, everyone you're talking about, but I know from my own experience, mostly these partners who will go on kind of a rampage with family members who are not supporting them to sort of water down the way it appeared when it was at its most, conflictual, crisis level event, and they get angry. And again, they alienate people. But this type of partner usually has trauma at the core.
Right.
So, it's not surprising that there's, we're creatures of habit, that it breeds a kind of familiarity where there's attraction to someone like a sociopath or a narcissist, because that's just sort of the way we're put together. And it's the realization of that and the ability to relinquish ourselves from it to get to a healthier place that determines the difference between someone who might just be kind of a normal neurotic and someone who really has deep-seated
issues,
trauma where all of a sudden now their partner is out, has been exiled, or is in jail, and they're feeling horribly abandoned. They're feeling horribly alone, and they might even be feeling a sense of blame. And so, like a 3-year-old going on a rampage and having a tantrum out of desperation, I say this with great sympathy and compassion, they go on this rant to sort of get everyone in their corner to just resume the former status. Anything to put things back into what seems like a better or more stable place, even if it was horribly unstable before. And so we're talking about the difference between those who, will still suffer with maybe some aloneness and where do I go with my life and what's going to happen, but they stay solidly planted in their decision to end the abuse, and others who get sort of swirled around in very old core trauma underneath.
Absolutely. Another question was regarding, just as we have with our wonderful president, which I know you're not shy about talking about, we have, talk about some serious flying monkeys there. We have people, the narcissism field is now booming. It was becoming more popular, and now it's really popular, which on the one hand, thank you, Mr. Trump, for making it a household name. That's probably the only thing I can kind of thank him for. But the other part of it is there are people that are out there stating that they're healers of narcissistic abuse that are in fact narcissists themselves, and they're causing further trauma, and they align themselves with really good people to try and make themselves have some sort of legitimacy, and they really are just going around, and once people catch on that, oh my gosh, this person is exactly what shouldn't be talking about this, they're one themselves, that, healer that's not really a healer, that wounder, unleashes their own sort of hell on anyone that dares pin a hole, just as Trump does, that thin skin. And it's really hard with victims now when they call in and they say, yeah, but I've been listening to so-and-so, 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 and we've had multiple reports and our own experiences with so-and-so, and it's been absolutely deplorable. So how do people, well, first of all, I'm, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on what I just said, and then we'll get into the questions.
You said a lot of really important things, Kristen. Number one, you're right. I mean, this term and the good news is there's a lot more information about the phenomenon and the syndrome of narcissism. It has skyrocketed.
Yeah.
it's a good thing and sometimes not such a good thing because, it's like everyone's a narcissist now.
Right,
So sometimes
which
it gets a
isn't
little
fair.
overblown.
Yeah.
But as you point out very keenly, narcissists themselves will see opportunities and grab them, right?
Yep.
So someone
Shiny new toy.
Yeah, it's a shiny new toy, and it's an opportunity to become a bit of a celebrity. So I'm going to call myself an expert in narcissism. And those who are feeling, desperate for answers, desperate for input and guidance and advocacy can really kind of fall under the spell, because let's face it, we can all fall under the spell of someone who has that sort of seeming charisma.
Right.
And it's
I
hard to
certainly have.
differentiate. Yeah, well, we all can. Anyone can. It doesn't matter your intelligence, your education, your socioeconomic status, your race, religion, etc. We are all, capable of getting captivated by this very charming individual who's, usually a good word crafter. And so there's a lot of, I've seen it myself. It's all over YouTube. I've seen people who call themselves experts in narcissism, and it's very scary. It's very damaging. I don't know how we'll reach all of the public to help them to be better consumers of good care and good caregiving and good healing and professional help, because we can't reach everyone, but shows like yours are opportunities to reach a good number of people. And I think that it's important to remind people that, whether it's therapy or it's self-help or it's just looking for some healing advice, be a really wise consumer.
Yes.
And make sure the person who's doling it out actually has some experience, some professional training, some, is abiding by some ethical boundaries. Look at their background, look at, their professional wisdom, and
listen to your gut. Because
listen to your gut. Yeah.
Even some of them that do have the cred and do have a counseling background are also out there really damaging people. It's like, it's one of those things where, they live and breathe and they go to school or don't go to school just like anybody else. So they can be an MD, a counselor, a business owner, whatever. And that doesn't mean that they're actually, they've created this wonderful facade because they've sidled up to other people that do the good work for a 2-minute video or something. And then all of a sudden they, want to jump on that legitimacy train and say it's theirs. And so you're right. You have to be such a wise consumer.
Yeah, you have to look at all of it. Yeah, I didn't mean to say just because they have like an MD or a PhD or an LCSW next to their name, that means they're the right person. You really have to look at all the pieces and listen to your gut, listen to your instinct around this. Look, in the stages of anger, when people are dealing with narcissism, there are natural stages of anger that can mimic a sense of health and a sense of strength. If I'm angry, then I'm strong. If I'm angry, then I'm moving in the right direction. It might be the thing that gets the wheels chugging and moving, that, anger can be the beginning of a healthy self-righteousness that can lead us to better decisions and more, self-advocacy. But hanging out in an angry position for a long time is exhausting.
Yes.
And it also becomes a kind of a cloak, that you're not really facing with strength, which is really being in that beautiful, calm, neutral, self-assured, self-confirmed position where you don't have to be angry to look at your life and look at your relationship and say, I'm done with that. I'm worthy of more than that. And to have to carry the anger suggests that you're not there yet. You're not on that platform where you can make that choice securely enough. And there's a lot of people out there, these imposters, who just love to get everybody revved up and angry, thinking, we have to be angry, we have to be angry. And it sort of infuriates me, if you can catch the irony in that.
Yeah, exactly. I've had them like blatantly blast other people using their name. And I'm like, are you an idiot? It's called a lawsuit. Like, you are now defaming other people that you don't even know because you're afraid that the narcissism pie is going to get smaller and you're going to get less of a piece of it. And it's just like, well, there's another indicator of someone
Right.
who has some serious problems.
Yes. Yes.
I can't even fathom that. I could never picture you doing anything like that. And what I want our listeners to understand, I mean, I have heard Wendy go toe to toe, and it's so as triggered as some people might get. Oh, someone that works with narcissists, the people we hate. I want you to hear this and hear what she's saying, because it's here to help you. Disarming narcissists is what we have to do to go into the battle of life. Every day. I deal with them every day. I don't attract them into my life. I did in the past. I was narc bait. It was across my forehead, but I was raised by them. But now I don't attract them. They live and breathe. And if I don't know how to disarm them in order to protect my company, my family, my friends, then I'm a sitting duck and I just refuse to be in that position.
Right. Good for you. Yeah, good for you. I mean, working with them, I know a lot of people will say, they're hopeless, give it up. What are you kidding me? You can't get change. And they're not wrong in that it's incredibly hard to get change. Yeah. And it does take this enormous amount of leverage, meaning consequences, to even get the ball rolling. But it's not impossible, and when you get change, it doesn't mean you have to hang out with them. That doesn't mean you have to give up your decision to move on to a more peaceful, healthy life. I think that's fine. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there when it comes to the narcissist who's transforming. But think of it like this. It's one less person on the planet who's going to cause damage. The healthier they can be, if you have children, the better parent they stand to be, where we break the legacy. The better co-parent they tend to be if you have to deal with them going forward into the future. And just the better person they will be. So there is something important about, disarming them, even if it's for the moment, so that you can deal with them in a social or professional setting, or disarming them in the treatment room, where I'm looking to try to create something that's more sustainable for the people that have to live with them.
Yeah, we don't ship people off to islands anymore for disturbing behavior. Right. We have to learn as a society how to deal with the ones that aren't in jail, that are out there hurting people by the thousands, that don't do anything or haven't been caught yet, and are hurting scores and scores of people. If you don't know how to handle those people, it's going to be very difficult for you.
Yeah. And you can spend your life being angry and blaming others for that, and feeling powerless, which is a terrible place to be. I mean, I think feeling disempowered and feeling angry can be equally fatiguing to our system.
Absolutely.
We get a lot of power by getting into a position where we are speaking out on behalf of ourselves calmly, and again, with that kind of self-assurance that really comes from our healthy, wise, loving mind. Too often we, because narcissism is so triggering to our soul, it's easy to feel vulnerable in the face of it. And when we're vulnerable, the only thing we can do is fight, flee, or freeze, right? We go into our survival mode. So it's so important to take a minute, never be afraid or ashamed if you're in the throes of it, just to say, as I do when I'm a therapist in the treatment room getting triggered. You can do this in everyday life. You just say, give me a minute.
I know, no one likes commercials, but seriously, folks, without the help from these organizations, we could not stay on the air. Please give a shout out to zencharts.com. If you're a mental health or addiction treatment center, you'll want to use their EHR. It's gorgeous, and they're just good people. And also MyGenetics, MyGenetx.com, because knowing your genetic code empowers your mental health treatment. And lastly, copenotes.com. We love getting positive messages right to our phones every day from Johnny Crowder. He's the lead singer of Prison, a heavy metal band sharing their music about suicide prevention, addiction recovery, and mental health. See, that was painless. Support them as they support us. Back to the show.
Give me a second. Something important is happening. I'm getting a little triggered, and I want to make sure I respond to this thoughtfully and honestly. And then you take your moment and you breathe and you tuck yourself in. You look at that little you in there, the vulnerable part of you that's getting activated, and you secure that part of yourself so that you can return to the adult that you are with the wisdom that you have. And then you don't need all the weapons and the defense mechanisms to simply look at them and say, okay, I'm back. This is important. I was just about to give in to your demands, and that wouldn't be so good for you or me. So no, I'm not going to do that. No.
Oh, let me tell you, Wendy, I have had people tell me, that have told me I am a narcissist or I am a sociopath, and they demand that I hire them and demand that I lie for them that they work for me, and demand and demand and demand, and then they unleash the flying monkeys to demand this as well because aren't they a good person? And I'm like, the only way for me to get through that being a CEO is to be as calm and unreactive as possible, and to get my information not from the triggered partner or the triggered family or from the narcissist himself, but to get it from the authorities, if there are any, that will tell me the truth. Because there's nothing like calling a doctor that works with narcissists in jail systems to find out, is this statement that they're saying true? No, thank you. And should I answer this? No, you should wait and speak to the actual authorities and don't get involved in this mess. I mean, I've, any CEO that's been a CEO for a long time has been put in those unfortunate situations, as have I, and I try to do it with a measure of compassion. But that compassion does not mean that I'm going to just roll over and let anyone track me through the mud for not complying with their narcissistic demands.
Yeah, right. And you said it, you just described that beautifully in terms of the position you literally put yourself in is one that's thoughtful, and it doesn't have to be responding in a snap, which is what is expected by narcissists. Like, they want an answer now.
They want you in that anger. Yeah.
Yeah. They want to catch you kind of off guard. And you don't want to be guarded either. So it's not about being guarded. It's just about being very present to yourself, to your own mind, to your own wisdom, to your own instincts, and being able to gather your information as you just described, but also gather yourself so that you're in a position of calm. There is nothing more disarming for narcissists than to be in that position of calm.
Right, exactly. And to say, I've spoken to the authorities, which means I've spoken to people who hear this kind of garbage all day long and who are going to tell me the truth about what's really going on.
Yeah.
How do you handle, because I'm sure I don't know, I won't speak for you. Have you seen situations where both parties have some kind of a personality disorder? And I mean, just that alone, how have you handled situations like that?
Well, it's tricky because, as I was describing a little bit before, if you're working with someone who has what we call borderline personality disorder, and that would usually be the partner to a narcissist. I mean, not always, of course. There's so many different varieties, but it's not uncommon to find in some of the most abusive and really, highly conflictual relationships that one partner will have suffered the impairment of trauma, maybe abuse in her earlier life, abandonment by someone in her earlier life, really struggled with maybe mood instability, and is just so, at a very vulnerable level, just so needy for the attachment to this big, sturdy, charming, interesting seeming hero, who is going to protect and provide and be all things to you for the rest of the time.
For them and make their life wonderful. Yeah.
And so it's not an uncommon pairing to see. And then what ultimately erupts is the narcissist who just wants to be, heroic and have what they want when they want it, because the more traumatized partner who may have BPD is more likely to, start out by being very surrendering and giving in and submitting to whatever the narcissist wants. But once they start to feel their natural longings for a real relationship, for real consideration, for respect, for some give and take, for true intimacy, the narcissist is now bothered by that. Like, how dare you?
Right.
And they're bored and they're angry. And if they're at the more severe end of the narcissistic spectrum, you're going to see abuse and aggression and at times even violence in the relationship, which can get very scary. So, it's not unusual that we'll find there are certain types that will gravitate towards one another, just based on early life experiences.
Right. And borderline is not a life sentence. And in no way, listeners, because I know you'll hear that and a lot of you may get triggered. In no way are we saying that every partner of a narcissist has borderline personality disorder. And some of you have been unfairly diagnosed with that when actually you have PTSD and trauma from being in the relationship with this person. So we're not saying that. It's sometimes that is the case.
Yes, that's right. No, absolutely. That's why I said no one is immune. There are healthy, non-traumatized, lovely people out there who, may have their bugaboos because we're all human, but they have not suffered the trauma or the impairments that come with someone who may have BPD or other types of personality issues. And they are finding themselves in the throes of these, string of narcissistic relationships or a long-term relationship they can't quite emancipate themselves from simply because of finances or children or fear or family or something. So no, I wasn't meaning that at all. That's an important clarification. But it is a not uncommon pairing to find that someone who has suffered in their early life, I don't like the labels anyway. I much prefer to look at it in schema terms, which means we're looking at how we get triggered because of early life experiences. Someone who has suffered abandonment, loss, or abuse, may find that this looks like a very, lovely and wonderful way to be rescued from all the horrors of once upon a time, only to find that there's way too much familiarity in this relationship once it truly exposes itself.
Yeah, exactly. And so many people who don't have a trauma background, who, like you said, are just, they were raised by loving parents, whatever, they get involved with narcissists and then they find themselves going, how did I get here? How, and behaving in all kinds of ways that they wouldn't and that they don't in any other relationship. And now they have fresh trauma that they didn't have before, but boy, do they have it now.
Exactly. And for some, for some people, it's not simple because there's always complexity in all of these issues of relationship, but it can seem as simple as just a person who is very sensitive to what they can see. I've had many women who can see the suffering elements of the narcissist underneath. They see that there's a suffering. They see that there's a level of impairment, that there's a little boy in there that, grew up getting the wrong messages, that, at times can be very shaken. And they have but the problem is, they have all this sensitivity for the narcissistic partner, and it comes at a really high price.
Yes, it does.
So it's always about, that's lovely that you're so sensitive to his vulnerability, but if he's not willing to do anything about it, what's the price you're paying?
Right.
If you're willing to leverage it a little bit so that you can see if he's willing to get help, okay. But if it just continues to, remain status quo, you're looking at, to the end of time. This isn't going to change. They don't change on their own. They don't just decide to change. That's the bad news.
Yeah. Everybody needs to hear that again. They don't. It's most likely something to do with like you said, leverage. All the times that I've dealt with one, it's been that there's some legal action that is going to blow a hole through their persona that by either prison or they're going to lose a company, they're going to lose their spouse, their kids, whatever, and they're going to lose money, which is like high priority list for narcissists. Yeah, part with
Yeah.
my money and I'll turn into whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's and then that is the leverage. Sadly, it's not the dog, it's not the kids, it's not the wife, it's not the employees, it's the leverage that is making them actually begrudgingly get help. And I mean, God will use whatever we can get. I mean, I had to go up toe to toe with a wealthy former athlete that wanted me to invest in his urine drug screening, illegal drug screening operation, and I was like, what? Oh my God, no, that is not going to happen.
But you encounter some really, really amazing narcissists.
I mean, we're media, so yeah,
I know.
they see shiny, shiny, shiny. I almost here's something, our listeners have heard this, but I want to be emphatic about it. Part of my disarming is to act like we're not successful, we're not shiny, we don't have any sway in the world. We aren't really as good as we say we are. And that's a disarming tactic that I have to use with some of these people so that they go, oh, she's not important enough to be involved with and bother. So moving on. And I'm like, okay, my ego had to be okay with being treated like that.
Yeah.
And to me, my ego was less important than their raging.
Well, your health was more important.
Yeah.
Your health and the sanctity of your own soul and preserving yourself and preserving your dignity. And it's just easier. Sometimes it's just too tedious. So you either fuel their ego by saying things like, come on, you're much smarter than that, and maybe a little bit too, maybe a little bit too special for something like my little show. It's a manipulation.
Oh boy, I did that to one who demanded all this stuff while telling me he didn't want any drama, and then told me I go up and down with my weight too much to run a network and all this craziness. And my response was, well, Oprah's doing great, and she has gone up and down with her weight, and she's African American and a female. I think she's doing fine with the network. I'll take my cues from her. Thank you. But we are too small for someone with your celebrity status, so we just don't feel that we could service you in the way that you should be serviced. And I was like, God, leave us alone. I don't care.
It was good.
So that's what we mean by disarming them. And they'll say, but you lied. I've had some say, but you lied. And I'm like, I will do whatever I need to do to protect myself from your rampant lying and abuse and so on. And if that means that I have to say that I'm not doing as well as I'm doing in order to get that, you're damn right I will do that.
Yeah. You're giving really good examples, because you're giving good examples of how to deal with this in the professional world, how to deal with this in even sometimes just the one-shot experiences that you want to keep them one shot so that they don't detain you, they don't get elongated. We talk a lot, when I've been interviewed, and even I think in my interviews with you too, Kristen, we talk a lot about what happens in the intimate relationship, what happens in the treatment room, in the therapy relationship. But I think it's just, we're living in a world now where it's also important to know what to do in just the everyday relationship.
Right.
So having these little, skills and tools and strategies for how to navigate narcissism out there in everyday situations is also really useful.
Absolutely. It'll keep you sane. And I truly don't care about the opinion of someone who takes pleasure in hurting other people. I just don't care. I used to.
Or doesn't have the remorse, because
the remorse, yes,
the sociopaths will take pleasure in it, and I really find that's in many ways for me that's a sort of a hopeless population.
Right.
The narcissists, it's not that they don't care. I mean, they can care. They do have the capacity, but when they're not willing to get past themselves and that ego so they can look at the remorse and the shame that they're actually feeling underneath all the noise they make, if they're not willing to do that, then you're going nowhere. I mean, this is it. You're looking at your future with them. So disengage. I say it's a simple word. It's called disengage. Not so simple if you're married to them and you have children with them and you have a lot to deal with. That's not so easy. But every chance you have, if that's not the case, disengage.
Absolutely. I mean, how do you, okay, last question for you. How do you, you know how Maya Angelou's famous saying about, when someone tells you who you are when you first meet them, believe them. I have my variants on that because I'm in the mental health field and there are some people that have done some horrible things in their lives. And yet they spend 20 years doing volunteer work for domestic violence centers to repay and served their time in prison and were diagnosed as a malignant narcissist, sociopath, whatever, and yet they don't live that way now. They are out there actually helping people. And so it's like a okay when you first meet them, but they also don't say to me, I'm a narcissist right now, I'm a sociopath right now, sort of in a, well, this is what I am. And the ones that do, I listen because they tend to want to tell you, spill their guts in some ways or give you tells, I've noticed. And so when someone says to me, I am a narcissist, I have a personality disorder, I am a sociopath, I don't argue anymore. I used to go, oh no, who told you that? Blah, blah, blah. No, I don't do that anymore. I just go, okay. And I move along my way.
Yeah.
Especially if they're doing behaviors like lying and have lied to me and been caught and so on. Okay. Yeah. Bye-bye. I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean, so how do I deal with that in the treatment room?
Well, just, or what advice would you give people when somebody says, I am this, and they are admitting it to you and you just don't listen, like you just continue on trying to prove to them that they're not what they've told you that they are?
Yeah, usually the opposite that I find is the more grueling case where they're denying that they have any issues with it and they're blaming everybody else. So maybe that's just the difference in treatment, where I'm meeting someone who has very flagrant signs of self-absorption, entitlement, demandingness, obnoxious, self-righteous, my way or the highway, no reciprocity, no empathy, blah, blah, blah. Right? So we go through the symptom checklist, and it's flagrant. I can see it in my interviewing of them, and they're still protesting, declaring, it's not me, it's the morons I work with, it's my partner who has hormonal issues. This is the harder part, is getting them not so much to own a diagnosis, but to own that this is a problem, and to begin to look at these symptoms as being incredibly meaningful and get to the root of it. So, but I think if someone is standing up and saying, look, I'm a narcissist, and they think this is funny or celebrity, say, okay, thank you very much. I have enough friends in my circle. Goodbye.
Exactly. I keep my circle small. It's not you, it's me. It's just a thing about me and my trauma history. I mean, I start going into, because God forbid I want them to become a 3-stage clinger and then take a narcissistic injury out on me,
Right.
Oh. Wendy, thank you so much for coming on, and please tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and all the courses that you're doing, because they need to be taking these courses. Yeah,
thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you again. I really enjoyed our discussion. They can find out more about me and my work at my website, which is disarmingthenarcissist.com, or just type in Wendy T. Behary and you'll go right to my website.
And the Twitter handle that I love that you have?
Dons and Divas.
Because when I first met you, I was dealing with someone who said the Don all the time, and I was like, oh my God, it was a sign. I didn't know it until I talked to Wendy and saw her Twitter handle.
Yep, that's me, at Dons and Divas.
Well, again, thank you so much, Wendy.
My pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners for another great show on Mental Health News Radio.
Aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it.
Good boy.
The Starlight Lounge presents An Evening with the Progressive Box.
Oh, what a great audience. Let's dim the lights for this next one. Nope, too much. There it is. Gotta get things just right. Like Progressive's Name Your Price tool. Tell us what you want to pay, and we help you find coverage options that fit your budget. And now, the mood is right. Wait, the lights are back on again. Trudy, can you? And now it's completely dark.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Face it, you're different. Everyone is. Same goes for your banking needs. That's why Columbia Bank offers an impressive range of checking account solutions specifically designed for, well, you. Looking for a rewards program? Check. High yield checking? Check. Mobile and online banking? Apple Pay? Check. You'll always find more checking choices for you. So check us out at your local Columbia Bank branch or ColumbiaBankOnline.com. Count on Columbia.
Equal housing lender and member FDIC.